Welcome back to another podcast with me and Kyler. As you know, my name's Luke and this is Kyler. Today we're going to be talking about 4 murders that happened in Idaho.
On November 13th, in the early morning, 4 roommates were stabbed to death.
Yeah, so there was 4 roommates at Idaho University. They just got done out on like a normal night on the town, kind of partying a little bit and just nothing out of the norm. When they went home at around 1:45, and in between 2 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the morning on November 13th, they were brutally stabbed to death. So yeah. And there's also 2 roommates on the bottom floor that slept through the entire thing. So there were 6 people in the house at the time of the murders, and 2 of the people on the very first floor slept through the entire thing.
How'd the killer get into the house?
So there was 2, or I guess you could call it 3 points of access to the house. There was a door on the bottom floor on the ground level that had a keypad to get into. So we can probably rule out that door, and also just because they probably would have tried to harm the people on the first floor if they went through that door. So yeah, and there's a keypad on there. The second point of access was this door on the back side of the house, which was actually on the 2nd floor because it was the house was kind of built into a hill. So yeah, there's a sliding glass door on the 2nd floor that led into their kitchen, and this is kind of the main entrance that it looks like maybe the killer or killers would have went through. So and then the third access point, there was a window without a screen on it, but the window was shut, and there was like a cinder block on the ground so you could like step through and get through the window. But they don't believe that was the access point, just because there's no DNA or fingerprints or anything like that on there. So yeah, those are the 3 access points. So Kyler, what do you think the killer's motivation was to kill these random 4 college students?
I think they had somehow made someone mad at wherever they were before, because they were out on the town, and I think someone had followed them home or something.
Like they had made someone mad before
they got home.
Just any old beef kind of, and then someone took exception to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could see that. So these couple of the girls were pretty popular, like on Instagram and stuff, before any of this stuff happened. So there's definitely a lot of eyes on them in the first place. So I wouldn't be too surprised if they had made someone mad, or if something or someone just took exception to it. But one thing that maybe I would say it wasn't just a random person is because it seemed like they knew the house. Maybe they knew where the 2 girls up in the upstairs were, because they didn't even bother going to the first floor, and they also knew where all the people were in the house, apparently. So yeah, so maybe it was someone who had been in there before, or someone they knew.
The girls were on the top floor, right? The 2 dating were on the floor they entered, right?
Yeah, so the 2 people dating, Ethan Chapin and Xana Carnoodle, were on the 2nd floor, which is also kind of the ground level, because on the back side of the house it is the ground level. But those 2 were murdered on the 1st floor in the same room, and then Kaylee Gonzalez and Maddie Mogan were also on the 3rd floor in the same bed is where the examiners found their bodies, murdered in the same bed. So yeah, it almost seems like maybe the killer had been there before, because they seem to have a knowledge of the house and just where everyone was. So, yeah. So they were actually at a frat party earlier that night from about 6 to about 9. And the frat house was about a minute walk from where their house was, where they were murdered. So, Kyler, do you think them being at a frat party earlier in the night have anything to do with it?
I don't know. I'd really like to know what they were doing during the time span. I mean, I'm not sure.
Yeah, so the fraternity president had said there was no security cameras on the property, so that's kind of unfortunate for this case. But Ethan Chapin was also in that fraternity. That's probably why they were there. So I'm sure the police are checking up with that and just keeping an eye on that fraternity because it is so close. But yeah. So, do you think, Kyler, that it was just one killer?
I don't.
And if so, how did they kill 4 people without any of the others waking up?
I don't at all. I think multiple people were there. There's no way you can stab 4 people and not one of them's waking up or not one of them screaming or.
Yeah, I agree with Kyler there on that one.
But at the same time, there was blood on the crime scene, so like.
Yeah, like that's it's kind of just a weird case, just because it's kind of confusing how one person could stabbed. It's like stabbed. We're not talking about shooting. We're talking about stabbing 4 people.
And none of them make a sound.
And then none of them make a sound. That's just kind of odd. So that kind of what leads me and Kyler to believe that maybe there was more than one, maybe even more than 2. I mean, we'll never really know until the police get their job done. So, yeah.
Do you think the roommates have anything to do with it? The bottom 2?
Me personally, I'm gonna say I don't think they do. Okay. And I know if you're probably just hearing it like, okay, they were on the bottom floor when it happened. They knew the house really well. There's 2 of them. It kind of all points in their direction. But the reason why I think it wasn't them is just because what would their motive be? Like, what would be their motive to kill 4 of their roommates by stabbing them to death? And then also, just going back to like just not acting like they didn't even wake up. Like that just kind of looks suspicious.
Yeah, I'm curious on why were they not informed until noon at the next day? You know.
Yeah, so that's why I don't think it was on to them. But like transitioning over from what you just said about the noon the next day, the police actually didn't get called until 12 the next day. So. And to me, that's a little bit suspicious because why would you not? I mean, I've woken up after 12 before, but it's kind of weird for the police not to be called after 12 the next, like on the 13th, the regular part of the day. So, and then also I heard from a news article that when the police call came in, that it was actually a unconscious person call. So the police weren't even really on high guard when they were coming there. So that's also a little bit suspicious on the roommate's part, but that still doesn't sell me that it was them, me personally. So there was actually a video shown from outside of the house a couple days later where it looked like maybe there was some like blood on the
coming out of the house.
Yeah, blood coming out of the house. I'll see if I can find a picture real quick. Yeah, and to me, we don't know that it was blood. It was just like a red substance. So we can't really say for sure. So we don't really want to say for sure that it was blood. But it was right where Ethan and Xana's rooms were right where Ethan and Xana's rooms were, like underneath that. So
That's what, bro.
come up here, throw a picture quick. I don't know if you can see that. It kind of looks like blood. We're not going to say that it's 100% blood, but yeah. So that's definitely a little bit kind of crazy, and just shows you how much maybe blood that there was on the scene. So yeah. So again, this was on November 13th in the early morning between 2 to 5. Kaylee Gonzalez, Maddie Mogan, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Carnoodle were all stabbed to death in the same house. Now there was 2 other roommates in there on the first floor, so just keep that in mind as we're talking about
We
this.
need to talk about the ex-boyfriend.
Oh yeah, so yeah, good point. You almost left out one of the main points. So Kaylee Gonzalez actually had an ex-boyfriend. His name was Jack. We're gonna leave out his last name just because we don't want any hate comments towards him because there's no for sure anything about him yet. So his name was Jack S. We'll call him Jack S because his last name starts with an S. But they had been dating for many years, and they actually broke up a couple weeks before this murder happened. So I mean, obviously a lot of eyes would probably go, oh, it's the ex-boyfriend. There's motive. He's probably mad at her. Maybe he killed the other people because they woke up during the stabbing or whatever. But
not the case.
the reason that maybe it wasn't Jack was because Kaylee Gonzalez's parents actually spoke up recently, and they don't believe it's Jack just because he was always so nice to them, and they didn't believe he was that type of person. The police have also cleared Jack S, but obviously they could be wrong, but it probably wasn't Jack.
I find it weird how not only just Kaylee called him on the night of they were murdered, but Maddie did too.
Yeah, so that's another point we gotta talk about. So on the night, or I guess the early morning of November 13th, from
an hour before they died,
2:15 to I want to say 2:55, there were 6 missed phone calls of Kaylee Gonzalez calling Jack S. Okay, 6. So, and also the person she was in the bed with, Maddie Mogan, her roommate, she had called Jack 3 times. And I've seen some theories online that maybe they were just had a few too much to drink and they were just calling their ex, but that's also just kind of suspicious to call someone 6 times. Mm-hmm. 6 times is a lot of times. 3 or 4 maybe, but 6 is a lot.
Especially an hour before they die.
Yeah, so does them calling Jack 9 times together, does that make you more suspicious of Jack or less suspicious of Jack?
Less.
Yeah, to me it does also, just because they wouldn't be calling Jack
I feel
if
like
he's
they were
stabbing
scared.
them.
They heard something, because I feel like they were killed last, weren't they?
I would imagine so, that
if
they were probably on the 3rd floor, so they were probably killed second. But yeah, I would imagine maybe they were calling him out of fear or something like that. So I feel like we can kind of rule out Jack. I don't want to say fully. I'm about 75% sure we can rule out Jack. So yeah, so I saw some theories on TikTok last night. So while scrolling through TikTok, and my For You page has been flooded with this type of stuff. And there was this person on Reddit that had posted that someone at their parents' job had been got suspended from work for carrying a knife, like a military knife, on their hip at work. They asked the person to, apparently, this is all apparently, this is from Reddit, so we don't know 100%. A person had been suspended from work for carrying a knife on their hip. Well, they got suspended for a week. Now, this person on Reddit said this. And later on, the investigators had looked up, like, I can't remember what it was, but there was some type of file online that said someone had been suspended from work for carrying a knife on their hip. So that was true. That part of it is true. Someone was carrying a military knife on their hip in Moscow, Idaho, where Idaho University is. Where the story gets a little bit crazy and maybe a little bit less true, but possibility that it's true. The person's address, which was also on that article, was less than a mile away from where the 4 murders happened.
Really?
Okay, and they were also he was also suspended a day before it happened and a week after. So that's also a little bit suspicious. And
so he was suspended a day before they were killed and until
a week after. Where it gets even a little crazier is then after that, like before that was posted, someone had the investigators in Moscow, Idaho, had put out that they were looking for a specific type of car, a white like Honda or Hyundai or something, some type of white Honda or something. Well, come to find out, if you go to that guy's address, the guy that got suspended for the knife, if you go to his address and go to Google Earth and go on the Street View, there's a white Honda posted or sitting in front of his house. So, and now obviously all this is like speculation, but that's just definitely an interesting theory. Or
was there any? Do you know any relation to them, to the parent?
No, I haven't seen any relation to the 3 girls and 1 guy that were murdered. So yeah, that's definitely a blank space, but it's definitely a start to something maybe that could be something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is definitely like this murder, or this I guess you'd call it quadruple murder, quadruple homicide, is definitely just kind of scary and kind of crazy, I would imagine, for people in that town.
Very odd, because the murder rate there, I mean, is very low.
So yeah, 4 murders in 1 house with a knife, that's kind of rare. I mean, I've never heard of it happening since I've been around. Like, to be able to murder 4 different people with 1 knife just makes you wonder if it was more than 1 person. Back to what we talked about at the start of this podcast, but if it was maybe more than 1 person, or if, I mean, I don't know, like if it was more than 1 person. So, yeah, so another theory that I was seeing online and that was kind of confirmed by Kaylee Gonzalez's dad is that Kaylee Gonzalez might have had a stalker. Now, we don't know this to be 100% true, but her dad, after the murder, had mentioned that she had said something about it to him a couple weeks before, but they didn't think it was a big deal. And on the night of the murder, they, when they're out at the bars and stuff, they stopped at a food truck called the Grub Truck,
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was called.
There's camera footage of them there, I believe, isn't there?
Yeah, so the Grub Truck was actually live streaming that night for some odd reason. That's funny enough. But Kaylee Gonzalez and Maddie Mogan are seen in line, and there's kind of a
There's a dude watching.
there's kind of a hooded dude with a white hoodie on and a brown jacket standing behind them, kind of not super close to them, but standing kind of behind them, kind of watching them maybe. And that was definitely suspicious. And then as they're leaving, the guy with the brown jacket kind of goes like where are they going? Like, what the heck? And then he starts kind of like fastly walking after them. Now, we don't know, like some people have said that was just one of their buddies, that like that wasn't anything. He was just trying to like make sure they got home safe. But that is definitely something to keep an eye on. Yeah,
for sure.
Keep an eye on for sure. And another theory that, and then there's also just the theory that her ex-boyfriend did it. We talked about that, how it's just kind of suspicious. But yeah, so that's basically the story of the Idaho murders and all the theories kind of involved. And this case actually only happened November 13th, 2022. So this case is far, far, far from being over.
Oh yeah, for sure.
We're not even a month in. So me and Kyler were kind of getting this information as it was coming out over the last week. So I'm sure by tomorrow, and even like right now, there's probably more information coming out that we're not getting in this. So yeah. So again, just kind of wrapping up, 4 random college kids murdered in a house with a knife in Moscow, Idaho University of Idaho. Definitely very sad. Definitely thoughts and prayers, or whatever you do goes out towards to those families involved.
For sure. Very tragic.
Definitely that's a nightmare situation, and we just kind of hope that the killer or killers get caught and get the punishment they deserve. But yeah, rest in peace, Kaylee Gonzalez, Maddie Mogan, Ethan Chapman, and Xana Kernagel.
Well, you gotta take this.
That is going to wrap up this podcast episode. So peace out.
Stay tuned for part 2.
And see you next time.